What is up, YouTube? How are you doing today? Today's video is coming to you from Duck, North Carolina. I'm standing at the ocean. As you can see, it's kind of a rough day, and it's actually quite beautiful. They have the no swimming red flag up though, and I think that's for a good cause if you look at the waves. So what am I talking about today? Well, it kind of relates to this location and on a couple levels, and it also kind of just relates to this location based on why we're here. So my heritage is Scotch-Irish, a few other things, and newly found out Norse, Scandinavian. And I didn't realize that until recently when I did my DNA test, but it explains some things. I like the beach for a different reason than most people like it. I don't necessarily like to come and sit in the sun and just tan. I like to look out over the horizon, and I like to see that edge. Whereas, and they say in Moana, the sky meets the sea. That's my passion. It's like that line is just begging for me to head its way and see what's on the other side. I've had a chance to do that, not by boat, but by plane in 2006 when I went to Spain. And it was neat because I found out what was on the other side. What was the other side of the ocean? And that time it was Spain.
Fehu's state of mind is a personal journey that I want to share. It is a quest for wealth, but not monetary. My journey is leading me to happiness, experience, and knowledge to create a better me. Join me on my adventure and dare to create your own. I am Sean McDaniel, and this is Fehu's State of Mind.
Standing on the East Coast looking across, you see a horizon, and at the end of the horizon is Europe. For me, the other side of the ocean took me to Spain, as I said before, and what I found in Spain was beauty. Beauty in the form of architecture and history. Beauty in the form of fountains that have been around since before running water. They used gravity to feed the fountains of the Alhambra in Granada. I found beauty in the rose gardens that have been there for centuries. In the ancient architecture of San Miguel Bridge, Toledo, Spain. I found beauty in the fact of knowing that was 700 years older than my country. I found beauty in the way that the Moorish, which was North African architecture, blended so seamlessly with the architecture of the European people of the Mediterranean. All that you can see here, these are pictures from, as I said, Alhambra, which is in Granada, Spain. I also found friendships. friendships that I'd had since the beginning of college, and this was the end of my college journey. This is my friend Garris Gardner. Here we are in Oporto, which is where port wine is made. We'd just done a port winery tour, and you can see the Sandeman bag in my left hand. Found new friendships. This is Amanda from Australia. We hit it off and had a lot of fun on the trip. Here she's posed with a barber ape. And this is her family, who I also consider friends. I deeply miss them because I haven't had a chance to go to Australia. It'd be neat to go over there and introduce my kids to her kids now. Also friends I've lost touch with. This was Louisa Mustafa. I met her on the ferry across to Morocco. We hung out on the ferry and have never had a chance to talk again. I also had a chance to do self-discovery in Spain. This is me in Gibraltar with a Barbary ape as well. They are wild on the Rock of Gibraltar. They are actually the British military force that protects Gibraltar, and they will come right up to you and sit down in your lap or on your shoulder or whatever, as pictured here. This is looking out over Granada from Alhambra, and once again, chance to self-discover, knowing that these were built almost 700-800 years ago, and your country's in its infancy, and at the time I was only about 23, 22. So it was self-discovery for me because this was something I'd never done before, and it was a foreign environment, but Spain and Portugal were foreign in a different way. The people looked a little bit different. The people that lived there, some looked like me because there was other tourists there. They spoke a different language than me. Portugal, they spoke a much different language than I even know, but at least in Spain I could communicate with people. The words looked different on signs, but familiar. The architecture is completely different from anything that I've ever seen in America. And as I pointed out, some of the streets are 500, 600, 700 years older than anything we have over here other than Native American culture. And this was remnants of a Italian settlement in Spain. So this is even older than the San Miguel Bridge. But for the most part, Spain is very, very similar to American culture. Except, and of course, they have things such as bullfights. And I found the bullfight culture fairly interesting because, on one hand, the bull is at a complete disadvantage. They go in and they stab the bull multiple times in the flanks to weaken his neck, and they come in and the matador is to fight the bull, and his goal is to actually stab the bull in the joint where the back meets the neck. It's supposed to be a fast and clean kill, and the meat goes to orphanages in the areas where the bullfights are happening. It's a amazing display of machismo, but it is something completely different than we know in America. And by American standards, especially modern standards, it's quite brutal. Sometimes for both sides. There are matadors that get speared. None when I was there. But as you can see, different stages, it takes a toll on the bull. And there are many matadors against one bull. And this is just another example of how things are different but the same. You see red tea, you see green tea, you see black tea, you see white tea. Different teas, but oregano's at the top. And this was cool because this was a spiritual journey of sorts. This was in Portugal, and this is actually Fatima, where many worshippers go to pray for healing. This is the Rock of Gibraltar as we were going across the Straits of Gibraltar into Africa. And what I have to say is that journey, this leg of the journey, was probably the most growth-inspiring leg of the journey. You can see from side to side. You can see Africa from Spain. You can see Spain from Africa. But actually going to Africa, was a totally different experience for me. The culture is completely different in Morocco. And yes, it's North Africa. It's more of a Middle Eastern culture. But how I can explain it is, number one, hospitality. These folks in this tent had never met us before. We were strangers on a bus, and our tour guide actually got off the bus and asked if we could have mint tea with them. This was our first chance to have mint tea in Morocco. And mint tea is a big thing in Morocco. And the sweeter it is, the more hospitable the people are. They're welcoming you. And this was sweet mint tea. These folks lived in a tent and traveled around the country making their own rugs. They were wanderers, Berbers, and we got a chance to partake in their daily life. And this really kicked off what I learned about Morocco, and that is just the level of hospitality that there is in Morocco. And this is a ancient door with many brass implements on it to ward off evil spirits, but it's like in Morocco, there's just an open door. And this was at one of the mosques where I had a chance to take a picture that they didn't know I was taking, unfortunately, of women dressed how they traditionally dress. And this is what we see, but this is not what I experienced. The biggest thing that I learned while I was in Morocco was that while you were in another first world country, because Morocco is, it is completely different. As I said, the people are hospitable. They're amazingly nice. I ran into maybe 2 rough instances while I was in Morocco. And when you're in the city center, it's first world. There's department stores and there's cars all over the place. You do see the telltale towers of mosque, and you hear the calls to prayer. And as you get to the outskirts of the city and outside of the city, the quality of life does change. But it is a blend of old and new. It's a blend of wealthy and not wealthy. The people that aren't wealthy, that do live outside of the city, they will make little trinkets for tourists that they sell, and they don't push them on you. They just sell them to you, and it's a chance for them to make a little bit of money. The kids you saw earlier, they're known for begging for money, and then once you give them something, either money or food, more kids show up, so they tell you not to give the kids anything. And contrary to my assumption of Morocco, this is what it did look like sometimes. It actually did rain there. I thought it would be a desert all the time. But as you see here, it's a blend of cultures. I mean, this is a gentleman who's in the guard who's dressed very traditional. This is a traditional village from Morocco. This was actually the set for Sahara when they were in the desert. And, this is what you think Morocco would look like. It's sand and a couple trees. But Morocco shocks you because that's not all there is to it. There's canyon-esque parts, almost like the western part of the United States. There's also beautiful colors that are almost what you would see at a beach location in America. There's beautiful scenery such as this, where you see a bunch of greenery that you're not expecting to see, and in oases, it's all green. And here you can see the mountains in the distance behind the town, and of course greenery. And as I said, that was not part of my expectations in Morocco. This is the Marrakesh marketplace right here, and this was actually a really neat experience. There are snake charmers, and they literally have live snakes that they put around their own necks, that they will try to put around your neck to get you to take a picture for money, that you can see here. And they actually, unfortunately, sew the snake's mouth shut, so once they do so, the snake will die shortly thereafter. But that's how they keep people from getting bitten by the snakes, because some of them are venomous. This was sunset in the marketplace for Marrakesh. This, I believe, was right before we went to dinner. And as you see, it's a blend of culture. I mean, it's modern culture. People dressed in westernized clothes. It's people dressed in traditional clothes. As the picture of the mosque showed, it's people dressed in more religious attire of modern era. This is also the grounds of the mosque. Part of that's my tour group, and then some people that from Morocco. What amazed me about both experiences, Spain, Portugal, and Morocco, or all three experiences, was how things that are so old can still be standing and have weathered. You know, it's like this oasis that just keeps surviving. You know, it's shocking when you realize that our country's in its infancy. This is actually coming into the desert from our Land Rovers. We had a chance to take Land Rovers into the barren part of the desert. This is rocky, very rocky soil, if you can tell, and it's flat. You'll see in some of these pictures that there are grooves where people will, of course, drive, and it's almost like roads in the desert that you just have to know how to navigate, as pictured right here. And we drove, I think, probably about 2 hours into the desert until we got to the sand dunes. And once we made it to the sand dunes, we actually got a chance to get out of our Land Rovers and take pictures. But here you can start to see the actual sand dunes and what you would associate with the Sahara Desert. They just kind of crept up, and the only way I can explain it is they were so much bigger than I ever thought they would be. And you know, this is just kind of a look at it. I guess the average sand dune, or these sand dunes, were probably about 300-400 feet, maybe a little bit more. But it was just monstrous compared to what you think when you see it. I mean, some of the videos you watch, you can really see how tall some of the sand dunes are, but it was just a total different experience seeing it in person. This is one of the Land Rovers when we stopped to take the pictures. As you can see, the sand dunes are in the back. I was pretty stoked about being in the Land Rovers because they're one of my favorite cars. That's a Land Rover Discovery 110 or 130, I can't remember. But I was pretty stoked about those because we don't really have those over here in America, and I just think they're amazing vehicles. And this is me in the desert, and you can see the dunes behind me, the rocky soil of where we're at. You can probably see in the next picture better the dunes because I think it's a little bit more open. This was before the term selfie, I do believe, because this was 2006. But, you know, had to take a selfie. This was actually the entrance to where we got our camel set, and we rode camels into the main part of the dune desert. This was a fortified oasis of sorts. Here you see Garrus on his camel. That's the head of my camel in the picture as well. And this is actually in the sand dunes of the Sahara Desert. It was really a neat experience to get into the desert and to feel connected with something so much older than you are. We were completely disconnected from just about everything. I think about the only touch of modern that we had is Garrus's cell phone that actually worked in the middle of the desert at the time. He would with T-Mobile, but it was just us on our camels walking through the desert. And you know, this picture actually I took from my camel, and I thought it was cool because it just kind of reminded me of what I always envisioned, the wise men riding in to see Jesus. And the fact that there's just nothing there, it amazes me that people were able to traverse this over, you know, time. And you know, they used the sun, they used stars, and they used where they knew they'd been, where they knew they were going to navigate. And that just, it was cool. And that having been said, one of the other sobering facts while we were in the desert was our guide pointed over in a general direction and said, "See over there, that's Algeria, I believe it was, and they're currently in civil war." We were close enough to the line that, I guess, line of sight, we could see it. We couldn't see the war happening, but, you know, just to know that we were that close to conflict. Our guides were dressed in traditional Persian robes. They were called, I believe, the Blue Men of Persia, and they're notorious for being desert guides. They actually run around the desert completely barefoot and take you to your spot where you camp. This was as night was falling. That was the camel I was riding. I got a chance to take a picture with the camel I was riding. And here it is without me in it. I actually fell in love with camels while I was riding them. They're really neat creatures, very smart. And if you've ever wondered what waking up in the desert would look like and what the sunrise would look like coming over the dunes, this is it. Just a glorious amount of light coming through the clouds up over the dune. It had actually rained the night before for a very short while we were in the desert, which as a rainmaker and scouts, that was kind of cool for me. I think they got about 3/4 of an inch of rain in a place where they only get about 1.25 inches to 1 3/4 per year. But yet again, this is the sunrise the morning we were in the desert. The thing that I found cool about Morocco, though, and I really did, I tell everybody all the time, I left a piece of me in Morocco. There's a part of my heart that will always be in Morocco, And this was two of the ladies on our trip, and we were in a restaurant, really good restaurant in Morocco. I can't remember where or what the restaurant was called, but the food was amazing. But as I was saying, I left a piece of my heart in Morocco, and I desire to go back. It's a place that I think was amazingly cool. It defied every bit of my perceptions and changed my outlook. At the time, we were still, fairly newly in conflict in a lot of the Middle East. 4 years before that, or 5 years before that, we had been attacked by, extremist Muslim terrorists. And to actually get to go step foot in a Muslim country and be welcomed with open arms so often was just a really, really neat experience. Then lo and behold, I do my DNA, and on top of being Norse, there's actually like 1% of me that's North African, and I joke with everybody. I say that was me leaving. That was Morocco touching me the way that I've always felt it did. It left a little bit of it on me, and I left a little part of my soul in Morocco. This is an example of mixture of friendship and the hospitality we shared. This is Garrus once again and myself, and we were actually standing on top of our host parents for the night's house. We were hosted by a family, and this was in Fez. This was actually fairly early in the trip. This was overlooking the old part of the Fez, the old part of the city, and we had a chance that morning. Our host took us up to the roof to show us his town, and the night before we'd had an amazing conversation. We actually talked Christianity versus Islam, and it wasn't even a versus, it was just talked about what was believed in Islam and what is believed in Christianity, and I got to see Islam from a whole different perspective, and it does not meet the narrative of media. When you're talking one-on-one with a person who follows Islam, it's a religion of love. It really, truly is, and that's all that was shown to me in the house I was in. The house I was in Morocco, and the stay we did in the Berber village in Morocco. And this would be the lighthouse, I believe, in Casablanca, I believe. But what I think was cool about this shot is it's kind of the reverse of what I was talking about. This was the only chance we got to see the Atlantic Ocean from the west coast of Morocco, and we didn't really see it from the west coast of Spain or Portugal. I got to see the Mediterranean, but I actually had a chance to look back across the ocean and see home and know that home was just the other direction. And that was pretty cool to get to see basically what would lead to back to Duck, North Carolina, which this photo is actually taken. So I hope you enjoyed this journey, and now I'll conclude the rest of my video. The Viking people, my ancestors, did what few other people did at that time. They were world travelers in a time where many people didn't cover that much ocean. It's pretty much established at this point that the Vikings were in America long before Columbus, long before many other people. And there are also accounts of the Vikings being down in the Middle East and even having swords that they shouldn't have had because they didn't have the technology in the north, but they did in the Middle East. I think that in the DNA of all people, we carry memories or longings and yearnings of those that came before us. For me, mine is the chance to see a new place, to go somewhere new. Now, granted, the Viking ancestors we all have, they also, or that any of us that are Viking had, they were also raiders and pillagers. But they were also looking for new land that they could farm and places that they could establish a new home if they needed to. And I can understand that. But I know when I stand here in front of the ocean that a good part of it just was, like I said, what's on the other side of that ocean? What's at the end of the sky? I mentioned Moana a second ago, and I actually really enjoy Moana because I feel a strong tie to my ancestors, and I feel a strong tie to the voyagers that came before me, and that's pretty much what the movie's about. So the first time I watched it, I was like, hey, this just really speaks to me. And while I'm not Pacific Islander, it spoke to me on a different level. So I said I'm here in Duck, and that's kind of two reasons why I like that. And those two reasons are, one, we're on a trip, and we're on one of my favorite places in the world. It's the Outer Banks. It's just relaxing. It doesn't matter what the weather's like, whether it's cold, whether it's warm, the waves are like this, or whether it's calm and you can actually go in the water. It's just always kind of nice. And I am also here, or the other significance for it is that if we were in ancient times, in medieval times, you would be on a boat. You would be either having to go out into that, or you'd be coming in on this to leave and go somewhere else. And I've always felt like that's been one of my callings, is to go other places, to see other things and experience other aspects of life. And I hope to be able to travel further eventually. But for now, I'm okay with Duck, and I'm okay with the Outer Banks and smaller trips. In November, you guys are going to get to see a trip unfold to Oklahoma, which is a lot of driving in straight lines to go out west, but it's really nice, and it's different. And I think that's what I like. I like the experiencing what's different about places. You know, people, customs, things, the way people live. The weather's different. And those are all things that fascinate me. I ended up in college as a sociology major. And I say ended up that way because I was kind of told to pick a major, and I had the most classes in sociology. Well, I had the most classes in it because I enjoyed taking the classes. I enjoyed learning what makes society tick and how people interact together. I like psychology, and that's kind of the same concept, just on the individual level. But sociology really puts it all together and makes you see how it works too, how we as individuals work with other individuals. So that's kind of what Fehu State of Mind is for me. It's a journey, sometimes physical, sometimes spiritual, sometimes just into my own thoughts. And I hope you enjoy it. I hope you're enjoying my ride. If you are, remember to subscribe to the channel, to click the notification bell, and also check out feihustateofmind.com. That's my website, and there's links to that at the bottom in the description, and there's also links to my Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and a few other things. This is my adventure. Right here is my adventure. It may only be an hour and a half away from home, but right now this is my adventure. This is where I want to be. What will your adventure be? Thank you so much for watching.